Greetings, Auto Subs, VideoJames again, and today I'm going to be doing a review of Monster Hunter Stories. Now, this is a game that I actually was really awaiting when it came out. I was really wanting this game to come out, and once it did, I was extremely happy because this game was really awesome, and I am a big fan of Monster Hunter. I've played about 4 of the old Monster Hunters, including 3 in Ultimate, and they were actually really good. They were some of my favorite old kind of games that I had ever experienced. And this one, I wouldn't say reached those potentials as a Monster Hunter game, but reached them as more of an RPG. So before I ramble on, let's get into the review. Hoopla. So Monster Hunter Stories is basically an RPG turn on the Monster Hunter series. It's basically, the story of this game is, you are a kid in the Monster Hunter universe who is going to become a writer, and you have to stop the Black Blight to save the entire world, basically. And in order to do this, you have to go around with your monster in order to purify all of the kinship ores, which are basically giant rocks that are scattered all over everywhere. Now, Monster Hunter Stories does have a lot of good to it. Monster Hunter Stories has amazing artwork in it, that taking all the stuff from the old Monster Hunter games and putting it in this new kind of RPG clay-ish style, they actually did a really nice job. It actually looks really nice with them taking the Monster Hunter from Breath of the Wild style to kind of animated style. And while the overworld and open world aren't exactly the same as they were in Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Ultimate, I had an itchy here. While they aren't the same in Monster Hunter World and Ultimate as they are now, they do still carry over a lot of the details, like the desert. It has still a lot of the details. It's got that giant rib cage of the Elder Dragon going down the middle. Another thing is the range of monsters in the game. That there's a lot of monsters that we're able to see in the game. That we get to see Rathalos, Rathian, Gold Rathalos, Silver Rathalos, Gold Rathian, Kirin, Rajang. We get to see Stygian Zinogre. We get to see Versa Pietru. We get to see a whole bunch of stuff. And a lot of the monsters in this game do actually kind of bring back some memories, especially Nargacuga, because I remember trying to fight that thing in Monster Hunter Ultimate, and it was an absolute pain. But in Monster Hunter Stories, they kind of changed that up a little bit. But with the range of monsters that we have now, it's kind of just expanding all over, that we get to see a whole bunch of monsters, but it still isn't that many. Monster Hunter Stories did kind of feel a little lacking in the monsters that it had. Well, we did get a lot of monsters in the open world, and we did get a lot of monsters that we could go around and fight. We didn't exactly get a lot that we could use. A lot of the monsters in Stories were kind of out of reach, and that kind of bugs me. Like, monsters like the Legiacris, or not Legiacris, Agnactor, that we couldn't get an Agnactor. I don't know why we couldn't have an Agnactor, because those things are basically just fiery Legiacris. I mean, they're the same thing. Why couldn't we use one of them? Or glacial Agnactors, why couldn't we use one of them? And a lot of the monsters that you see late game, like Crucial Deora, Teostra, Rajang, we don't get those until way later. We don't know when we're actually getting them in the US. Who knows when we're getting them? We're supposed to be getting them after the 1.3 update, when Japan got them with a 1.2 update. So, I have no clue when we'll get new monsters, but as of right now, Stories feels a little bit too lacking in the monsters that you actually can get. And that kind of transfers over to the weapon scenario as well, that a lot of the weapons are kind of lacking in variety, that most of the weapons do tend to be either fire, electric, or non-elemental. And that was another problem with the monster variety, is that there were almost no water element monsters. That almost none of the monsters had any water element to them. They had the attack, or the resistance, but there was only almost one monster that actually classified as a water element, and that was the Zamtrios. Which, to me, kind of feels a little lacking. I would have felt that they would have made a monster that would also be water in addition to the Zamtrios. Like Legiacris, I would have expected they would have edited it a little bit to make Legiacris water. Or they would have done an update and made him water in Monster Hunter Stories, like they did with previous monsters in the past, where they've done a bunch of updates. But it still is a nice variety of monsters. I do still like it a lot. They do still keep a lot of the cool monsters, like Kushala Deora, we still get him. Silver Rathlos, he's my favorite right now. I actually have him on my party as my first monster. And a lot of the monsters in this game are actually really cool. That we get to see a lot of fan favorites, like we get to see Velocidrome, Nargacuga, we get to see Congolas actually coming back. We get to see Stygians and Ogres, Kirins, a lot of people love Kirins. And we just get to see a whole bunch of stuff. And we do get a little bit of expansion. I think there is a way to actually get a Glavenus egg soon, that we might actually get Glavenus eggs in the near future. But with the Legend of Zelda DLC, we can also get an Epona egg, and we'll actually be able to make Epona one of our monsters, which I really like, because I absolutely love Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time is one of my favorite games of all time. It absolutely blew me away the first time I played it, and then when I played Ocarina of Time 3D, I just absolutely went bonkers. But anyway, another great thing about Monster Hunter Stories is the new mechanics. So, Monster Hunter Stories kind of adopted a new turn-based mechanics, as well as a new rock, paper, scissors sort of mechanic. So the battle in Monster Hunter Stories kind of switched from the old kind of Monster Hunter where it's just like you get to do random attacks and random stuff whenever you want and just swing your swords and shields around and attack at monsters. But now it's more like a turn-based system like they had in Dragon Quest or they had in Pokemon. And it kind of revolves around the new rock, paper, scissors mechanic. So in Monster Hunter Stories, there are 3 types of attack that you can actually use. There's power, there's speed, and there's tech. And a lot of monsters have specific patterns that they will actually follow. So a Rathlos, for example, would use power, or a Kirin would use speed. A Kezu, power and tech, is usually the main combo. It will go a few turns of power and then it'll switch to tech. However, there is a problem with this mechanic, and that's a lot of the times the monsters don't really follow their patterns, and they don't really give a cue as to what attack they're going to use. So, say for example, I used a Gypsaros, and the pattern was tech. Okay, so I expect a power attack, but then most of the battle the Gypsaros uses power. Okay, after a few turns of using power, I go to use a power, and it switches to speed. It kind of is a little frustrating after a while. The mechanic doesn't really keep up with the gamer, it doesn't really match what you expect. And that makes the battle a lot harder, that a lot of the times the battles become unpredictable and it becomes harder to actually see what you're going to do and how you're going to actually win the battle. And a lot of the times when you're fighting monsters, especially in the wild, I don't know why, but every time you seem to fight a monster in the wild, they don't seem to get any weaker. I don't know why, but for some reason, when you're fighting monsters in the wild, no matter how high level you get, if you get to max level, no matter how high your armor is in upgrades, the monsters will never seem to get weaker. That the monsters in the wild, like the Rajang, they never seem to lose any of their strength. Or the Teostra when it uses its supernova. No matter if you have max fire armor from Teostra pieces, you still get one shot. It really doesn't seem like the monsters have any sort of adaptation to the player level. And when it comes to a leveling based game and a upgrade sort of game, that kind of feature is a big deal. Like, you wouldn't think that they would just leave out a big factor of you actually being able to take something out in a fight that is basically revolved around weakness and resistances and all that. And there is a lot more to the mechanics than meets the eye. They do provide a lot more of a challenge in the multiplayer mode. So, like all Monster Hunter games, Stories still has a multiplayer mode. However, the multiplayer mode doesn't really seem as fun as fighting the monsters in the wild, because in multiplayer mode, you kind of expect what your opponent has to do, but then you kind of expect them to expect you to expect what they're going to do. And it just kind of becomes unfun because you're just basically going by playbooks and trying to basically counter your opponent for every move they make. And it doesn't really seem fun anymore. That, okay, I can just do this and immediately counter. And it won't matter. I'll win anyway. And it seems like in the rider battles, the riders and monsters are too easy to take down. That the riders and the monsters get extremely weaker in the rider battles. Especially the riders. Like, even in the open world, riders take a lot more damage than the monsters. Riders take about, I would say, 3 times the damage the monsters do, but they still can't really keep up with the monsters. The monsters will still do massive amounts of damage to them, and then if they attack the monster, it won't really take about a pinch of damage off it. And I would say another gripe about this game is probably the story. The story really doesn't last as long as it should for a Monster Hunter game. That a lot of us know to effectively beat a Monster Hunter game, it will usually take around 100, I wouldn't say 100, about 200, 300 hours to effectively beat one of the actual Monster Hunter games. I could have beaten this game in 50. I'm not legitimately joking. I could have probably beaten this game in 50 had I not tried to make my monsters stronger and actually take my time with the game. It is really easy to get through, and to me that kind of seems like it's defeating the purpose, because the entire point of this game was to make an RPG Monster Hunter. Yet what we get is something that relies more on hunting than monster battles, or monster stories. And to me that's kind of a letdown, honestly. I mean, we will be getting an update in the future that will provide more story, but it doesn't really seem like that'll have any connection to the current story. That it seems like the new story kind of will be following along more with what the Monster Hunter anime will be doing, and that's basically a spin-off of the game. Which means that now, instead of the anime taking from the game's taking from the anime. And that kind of seems not good. By the way, I've seen the anime. I've seen the entire anime. They've gotten farther in the anime than in the game. That they've already introduced the Black Order. They've already introduced all this new stuff that we're supposed to be getting with the 1.3 update. And Monster Hunter Stories barely even scratched what the story was capable of. That a lot of the characters we don't really see anymore. That in the anime we see a whole bunch of the characters always coming back. We see a lot more weapons, a lot more monsters, a lot more actual features in the anime than we do in the game, and it seems like they should all be in the game. It seems like we should be immediately seeing these once we get into the game. But then we open up the game and it's like, okay, where is this? Where is this? Where did this go? And we realize, hey, half this stuff's not even here. Like the Zamtrio's hunting horn, for example. The Zamtrio's hunting horn, nowhere to be found in the game. I've checked. I've checked every single area ever. I've killed about 100 Zamtrios just to try and get the horn. It does not exist. Okay, but then why would the anime have it? Questions for another day. But, moving on, Monster Hunter Stories, while it may not follow the traditional Monster Hunter pattern, is actually a decent game for what it is. That, with it following the Dragon Quest turn-based RPG style instead of the traditional open-world monster hunting experience, it is actually good for what it is. That Monster Hunter Stories achieved most of its purpose, I would say. But again, the game feels extremely lacking. It feels like a lot of the basic stuff that we should have got isn't really here. That there isn't much variety in it. There's not as much story. There's not as much of anything, really. That almost all the monsters, okay, those are basic things that we should see. Where's all the extra stuff? And the weapons, okay, these are all one weapon with a different skin. It seems a little odd, to be honest. It seems like the game didn't really include as much as it was supposed to, for a lack of better thought. But it did include a lot of what it was supposed to, so I would give this probably a 4 out of 5. I wouldn't really go so far as to say 5. I would say, if you like RPGs and you are a Monster Hunter fan, then I would say that this would be good for you. I wouldn't really say it would end up being your favorite game. But if you do like Monster Hunter and you are a slight fan of RPGs, this would be a nice game for you to actually own one day. And I would say that the amiibos are worth the price, but they really aren't. The amiibos kind of just are like new figures. They're kind of like replacements for those old Monster Hunter figures that you used to get with the kind of 9-packs that you used to get. And to be honest, I kind of prefer those. I kind of prefer the variety of the 9-packs to the amiibo. That the amiibo really only has 3 figures. And that kind of disappoints me a little bit. But anyway, before I ramble on any further, I'm going to leave this video here. So I'll leave a link to the trailer for Monster Hunter Stories down in the description. I'll also leave a link to where you can check out the game and check out a few of the updates that are supposed to be coming out in the description below. And if you guys like this video, you can slap the like button as always, and I will see all you beautiful people in the next video.